Good morning, and we're live. Happy Wednesday, happy blast and a half. And I am so happy you're here because today we have a voice that needs not only to be heard, but needs to be followed. And why I'm doing this and why I've invited the Kenny Thacker, and don't separate his name, by the way, is because not only was Keni there long before he actually put DEI programs into place, but he is doing something about it with 100 Roses from Concrete. We're going to get into that in a minute. But Keni, you are not only a thought leader, which I don't use randomly. You have been a speaker at South by Southwest. You have been in the diversity space before it was, the cool kids table, right? You were there and you were leading these initiatives primarily at the big mothership that we both were a part of, called JWT, which is a global agency, and really have been advocating. And you say it's like, pushing a boulder up the hill, and as soon as you lift a finger, it starts reversing backwards. And so we want to be here today, not only to listen to some of your struggles, but also to be able to walk away from this 30 minutes with at least one actionable tip that anyone, whoever you are, can implement immediately. So thank you for coming, Keni. I am so thrilled that you're here. Really excited.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being included in the conversation.
Hell yeah.
As, as any of my fellow roses know, one thing I can do is talk, but it's also about knowing how to chew gum and walk at the same time, and that's something that we, as a collective, organization of 100 beautiful people from all walks of life, white, black, Latinx, Asian, straight, gay, everything. That's something that we do. We're not just, talking about it, like we're actually doing the work. And I'm not saying there's not people out there doing the work, but like we constantly have something going on. We address issues, whether it's women's reproductive rights. Like we're not afraid to say something about that if we don't agree with the way things are going, whether it's violence in the AAPI community, whether it's the mistreatment of Black people, anybody, our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters. Like we just say it because honestly, Lauren, we got shit to lose. We just don't. I mean, we appreciate the generosity and support from our partners, but they also know that our opinions are our opinions, so we don't need to associate them with our opinions if they agree or not. But they know that this is just what we're about. We are roses, but we're prickly. We are we are prickly, and
Which is
that's
why
like,
I had you here. Which is why I wanted to speak to you, because I am not looking to play nice here on LinkedIn.
we are definitely prickly. Needless to say, we are not those roses that they shave the thorns off
Right.
of.
No manicuring on these roses.
Not manicuring at all.
So as we have been talking before the show, and even as a little bit of prep before we brought this live, this conversation, this DE&I conversation has been spanning, I'm going to use my fingers as a way to demonstrate, 6 effing decades.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit about what is the biggest challenge that you face and what we can also do about it, even if it is the smallest thing. Let's move this needle.
Well, so it's been a long time, with this conversation, like 6 decades, right? But when you even think about what if you're an advertising nerd out there, that racially motivated or sexually or sexist ads have been around for like 100 years, literally like the 1920s. If you look up some ads from the 1920s, you're just like, wow, right? But it stems back to what was brought up 60 years ago, starting with a few people like, the advertising great Tom Burrell, who I've had the privilege of talking to maybe about over a year ago, but even the late great Bill Sharp, who was actually worked at JWT, who was the first African American copy supervisor. A little ad history for y'all that don't know any ad history of Black people in advertising. But in my conversation with Tom, he was like, I appreciate everything that you're doing, props to you and everything like that. But he was like, aren't you tired of this being the hot topic per se every other 10 years? Because something happens, right? Something happens and the industry is either investigated, or the screams from the rafters just get so loud that here we go, right? And I was like, you know what? You're right. I mean, I haven't been in the advertising business as long as Tom Burrell, so he's been able to see this, right? But I've been able to kind of see it from my POV, and like, okay, so for instance, not last summer, excuse me, but in the summer of 2020, like the good people at 600 and Rising put out that white paper, right? And it was like, awesome, awesome, awesome. And I'm glad they had it on paper, because the rest of us had just been saying it out loud.
Right. And like, give it to us straight. Like, do not dumb it down. What is it? I know what it is, but I want you to say it out loud.
Yeah. So it is obviously, the diversification and the change of the demographics of what these agencies are actually made of, right? It's the hiring, it's the paying, it's the including of this talent to obviously make the work better. So it actually benefits the bottom line at the end of the day. But unfortunately, a lot of the levers that are being pulled behind the curtains are by people that don't look like what America looks like at the end of the day, right? And due to the fact that that's happening obviously behind these closed doors, then it's like, okay, then we see why things are the way they are. So in like, the pre-chat that we were talking about, one thing that I was extremely ticked off, or let me just say pissed off about, especially in 2020, was that, okay, so this white paper did a lot of great stuff to put people on notice, but then as the transparency started happening, these figures literally said that these agencies knew about this problem a long time ago.
Right.
And did absolutely nothing. So they were perfectly fine with BIPOC talent being less than 3% in higher leadership positions. And I'm talking about like in the C-suite, like less than 3% in these big holding companies, right? It's just like, so you literally have hundreds of agencies under you, and you're telling me that pretty much every single C-suite has absolutely no people of color. And some of them, yeah, on the gender balance side, maybe a little bit balanced, but as far as people of color, like they are literally absent from making any major decisions, right?
And I love this point too from Alex. While stealing from the culture for decades, they want the culture but not pay the authors.
Exactly.
And so this is a huge ouch, and it's also systemic, right? We use that word a lot, but it's been going on forever. And I know that you're from the advertising world. This is, of course, not limited to that industry, right? It's happening across the board. This happens to be your homeland, and the trickle down effect of how advertising works, who we see, the influence of what that am I identifying with this audience is a disconnect, because our world, I mean, look at what happened during the pandemic. I mean, half my clients don't even live near me. The people on LinkedIn are from all around the world. Every single day, my buddies in the UK, my buddies here, my buddies there. This is not a homogeneous world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would really love to understand is, here I am, like, person in the marketplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do I know, like, who is walking the talk, right?
Yeah.
Who is giving the dishing out the BS,
Yep.
a lot of lip service. Oh, we
Mm-hmm.
have this, we have a DNI initiative, and we have, all this, and who is
Yeah.
legit.
Yeah.
Tell us
Well,
what we can sniff out.
and the great thing about the time that we're living in now is that literally the power is in our hands, right? So it's all about, if whether you're interviewing with an organization that wants to work with you, or you're interviewing for a job that you're going to work at that said organization, it's all about, as soon as they give you that microphone to ask any questions, that's when you ask your questions about, their DEI practices, policies, procedures, programming, all of that stuff. But it's not only when you get that microphone in your hand, it's also doing your research, right?
Hello.
It's all about doing your research. And if that agency, company, organization only started their DEI journey in 2020, that should raise an eyebrow.
Okay, there you go. So if it's brand spanking new,
Mm-hmm.
because they want to jump on the bus,
Mm-hmm.
danger, danger, Will Robinson, right? Like that
Yeah.
is, and also what I would also ask you
Mm-hmm.
specifically for is, what does that mean when you say you have a DE&I initiative? What does that mean? Because that's easy talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's easy talk. And that's why it's important to see what type of actions, right? What type of data do they have to show of the work that they've been doing? So, like, for instance, I mean, I know I have one of my board members on the call here, but like, when people ask us, oh, so what are your numbers? And we're like, yeah, well, 90% of our program graduates find jobs within the industry within the first 6 months. That's 90%. We've put out 8 commercials within the last 2.5 years, and we're a nonprofit organization making ads. So, like, if you want to ask what our numbers are, we have 18, I think it's 18 million media impressions for our nonprofit clients. We raised over $100,000 in free media for nonprofit organizations. We've graduated over 100 young people from our programs that are young and over the age of 40. So you want to ask us our number, I'll give you our numbers, because our numbers are ones that the work that I've done, and excuse me, not I, but myself and my team have done with 100 Roses in the 2.5 years, I wasn't able to get done in 13 years working at JWT. It's insane. It's insane. So when people are asking, like, what are those DEI initiatives, it's very important to kind of figure out, okay, so when were you doing this? Who was involved? How are you following up? How are you keeping people engaged? What is the support of executives in this program? That's
Yeah.
a very big thing, right? Because it's one thing to have, like, your mid-level and, like, lower level people kind of like championing all those things. But especially in my private practice, I'm like, I need an executive sponsor on every single ERG that you have. There should be someone from the C-suite actively participating, or at least in the loop of what's going on with your DEI initiative. It's one thing to be like, oh, you give them a piece of paper and they kind of read about everything that's going on. No, they need to be active participants in this movement. So they're not just looked at as kind of standing at the top of the mountaintop looking down and seeing all the things that are happening. They need to be active participants in it. That's the only way this is actually going to happen. Because, I mean, a lot of the times, we say, oh, well, you need executive buy-in. Yeah, buy-in is great. The investment is beyond necessary, but you also need the actual brain power, because then we can connect to their networks of other people that do have the buy-in to make the buy-in even bigger, right?
Right.
And then we're making splashes that will continue to kind of fertilize our garden of where everyone's accepted and everyone's appreciated and everyone's respected and everyone is paid fairly for a very, very long time. So, but it has to start with active executive participation in all these things. It's not
Right.
just kind of handing them a
And like
sheet with.
you said, this is not new, right? Top down
Mhm,
is not new,
mhm.
right? It has to be filtrated through the entire organization. I would love to address this question.
Yeah,
Love, love, love. How do you hold yourself and leaders
yeah,
accountable? This
yeah,
is this is the piece that grinds my gears,
yeah,
right? We talk
exactly.
and then who does?
Mhm. Well, how do you hold yourselves and leaders accountability? Great thing, right? So there's three things. I feel like we need to be accountable. We have to be adaptable, and then we have to take action. If we're not doing those three things, then your DEI initiative, whatever program, like it's pure shit. At the end of the day, accountability, responsibility, and adapting to the new ways and making sure those are followed out. Because as we know, the turnaround right now for employees is very high. People are leaving places after 8 months, 12 months, 14 months. So it's like we need to make sure that when we have, whether it's a group of people or a person that's kind of championing this, that they also have a co-champion just in case they're not there anymore. Right. And we
Okay.
have to make sure that we are creating pillars that we can hold ourselves accountable for. So, like, for instance, for the roses, our three pillars are they're not accountability, it's collaboration, connection, and growth, right? So everything that we do has to cover collaboration, connection, and growing our members, regardless if they're associated people with our organization or not. And that's something that we run through every single thing that we do. We always have to look back to, like, all right, are people connecting? Are they growing? Are they
Right, but
collaborating?
Kenny, let's just face it.
Hmm.
This is your mission. What
Hmm.
about folks who are, what does it look like to hold your leader accountable?
Yeah.
What does it
Well,
look like so that you are
mhm,
advocating and making sure that shit is getting done,
yeah,
and also being able to, let's just say you are not ready to walk out the door.
yeah.
What does that
Well,
look like?
Well, it comes to holding their feet to the fire, per se, and it's like revisiting old quotes, right? So revisiting old quotes by your leaders that are like, "Oh yeah, we're going to improve this, or you're going to improve that." Give them like 6 months to a year, sadly, but it's about kind of revisiting like these promises and making sure those promises are actually kept. And if they're not kept, then you bring them up. Now, whether it's through an email, or, I mean, obviously no one's really like meeting in the office anymore, or maybe they're getting back to that, but like a great place to do it, sad to say, is like at a town hall when they're like, anybody have any extra questions? Well, you said in advertising week or an ad or Digiday or whatever, you said this about diversity. Look at your team and tell me how your words match up to what your team looks like right now. It's
And I
about,
like doing it in a public forum
yeah,
because
and
it,
it's
it
about
gives you
asking
it
those
gives
hard
you some
questions.
support.
Yeah, it's about asking those hard questions, right? Like, Rome wasn't built in one night. The earth wasn't built in 7 days. It was built in like 7 days. But it's a matter of really holding their feet to the fire. And if it's even about you being a part of the process to help that change, then that's what it is. But we also, because we can't just complain all the time, right? That's one thing that I've tried my best not to do all the time, is that, yeah, I'll have complaints, but I'll also have solutions. We all have to be a part of solution, because that's the only way we're going to get it done. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, we didn't create the problem. I know we didn't create the problem, but the people that created the problem don't even know how to solve the problem.
Mhm.
And the reason why is that because the problem even outdates them.
Mhm.
Right, this is something that's been ingrained. It's been kind of, it was built into the cement of this basically industry at the end of the day. Like, when we really think about how creative teams were built and account teams were built, like, they didn't really have like people of color in mind. Like, that's just not how it was built, because they kind of viewed us as quote unquote less than, right? So it's very important to think about, like, this is something that's very old. Now, is there ways to kind of cure this cancer a little bit faster than we have in the last 60 years? Yes. because 2020 did give us a wind behind our back. It actually did. But that wind has kind of turned into a soft breeze. And that's how things slow down. So there has to be a way for us to get that strong wind behind our back and just basically have that strong wind be the continuous flow of air of change. That's how the real change really happens. But we can't like let it die down, because the minute we let it die down, we're going to become complicit.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
that's where the problems, and that's where just the old problems kind of come back around. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, you thought we forgot? You thought you forgot about us?
It
No,
just
we're still
faded
here.
away,
We
right?
just made it here." I mean, I remember in 2020 in particular, I can't remember if it was pre George Floyd or after George Floyd, but I was like, you know what? The one thing that's going to be here after COVID is racism, sexism, xenophobiaism, all those isms. They're still going to be here.
So I
But
want to ask you this. This is important, this next
Mhm,
question. In the world of hiring, obviously, there's the
mhm,
decision maker. There's
mhm,
also recruiters,
mhm,
headhunters,
mm,
coaches, people
mhm,
who are working with amazing talent.
mhm,
And we need your voice. I get asked this question a lot. Do
mhm,
you work with people of color? Of course.
mhm.
Yes, I do. So, how do I know, you being a white girl, how do I know that you're going to be able to help me with my wants and needs?
Mhm,
Right. And I go back to the data of the folks that I have already worked with and said,
mhm,
it is a responsibility that I have, but ultimately you have to determine what proportion of your candidacy you want to align with your diversity efforts. Where are you in this? Is that something that you want to sing loud and proud from the rooftops and put it all over your LinkedIn profile? All the power to you. Great
mhm,
idea. Awesome. Love it. But I am not in a position to tell you what to do.
mhm,
It's your decision. But as somebody who is so passionate about this topic, what
mhm,
can we do as advisors and or recruiters that are, I it's been said to me before, oh, we want a woman of color in this position.
mhm,
And I like literally get the heebie jeebies. Well, what's that for? Because
mhm.
you're checking a box?
Yeah.
What is going on here? So what is your advice to all the folks who are in the hiring world?
Yeah. So I, the people in the hiring world sometimes don't like me.
I
Sometimes
like you and I want you to bring it.
because of my opinions, because of my opinions. But one thing that I have to say is that, look, as you know, in my private practice, I do talent sourcing, so I understand that we're beyond in a war right now, right? When it comes to talent, and especially for talent of color, right? But the sad thing is that even in this war, I still hear from talent that's being mistreated in the interview process, whether they're being ghosted, or whether they're being offered less money, or even I had someone tell me about, they went through 4 interviews and then they offered her a role, and it was 3 levels down from the role that she was originally interviewing for. Like, this stuff is happening in the year of the Lord 2022.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I get it that, like, everyone's on the scramble trying to find talent of color and everything like that. I get it. But like, we can't lose our humanity in this war for talent, right? And if and but we also have to make sure that as a company, whatever our company, we're agency X or whatever, we have to make sure that our ducks are in line to address and treat talent of color fairly and pay them beyond fairly, right? Like, that's what needs to happen. But we can't just kind of rush out the gate and think like, oh, everybody's want to come work with us, and we know that 70 to 80% of our director and hire people are not people of color, period.
Right. So it sounds so basic.
Hmm.
It sounds so simple.
Hmm.
Treat people with respect, pay them fairly. I mean, I mean, of course, this is epidemic within the hiring process. Mm-hmm. People get ghosted all the time. You know, especially women are mm-hmm. not the best negotiators. And so they need a lot of help. And I'm imagining that on the BIPOC side, this is like the dial is turned up even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let me just say this really quick. The bad thing when people are ghosted in particular is that it F's with your self-esteem, because you feel like, oh, I'm not even valuable enough for them to tell me they're going to move on with somebody else. Right. And when I hear like some of these stories from some people that, you know, reach out to me, or some people that I know now because they've reached out, it really hurts. It hurts me to hear those stories that, yeah, you know, my self-esteem is at an all-time low because, like, you know, I'll go through 1-2 interviews, sometimes even over 3 or 4 interviews, and then it's cricket.
Yes. Oh,
and
yes.
then crickets, right? And it's just like, no, just it takes have a template that you can just copy and paste. Like, just do that, but don't leave someone hanging. Right. And the crazy thing is that it's not even like the smaller places. It's not just the smaller places. It's the big places as well that are doing this. And it's also like, you know, it's people that are kind of, you know, they're just trying to make their numbers, right? Or unfortunately, a lot of agencies are extremely bad at forecasting when they have jobs open, right? So every job is a 4-alarm fire, and they're trying to fill that role, right? But the thing is, like, on the recruiter, you didn't ask for that 4-alarm fire. You just want to help find roles. So we have to get better at forecasting, and once again, bring back that humility into how we interact with, you know, candidates that we're looking at. It's just about that humanity, because people think, oh, we had a really great conversation. She loved me. I thought she loved me, but then, you know, I didn't hear from her again.
Oh, every day, right? Every day. The last question I really want to break into is, what is the number one mistake that anyone who is, you know, seeking a D&I culture, because who isn't, right? I'm sorry, but like, it's today. What is the one mistake that people make that need to avoid? Job seekers, people in leadership, what is the one mistake that they get tripped up on over and over and over again?
So that's simple. They believe the hype, right? They believe the hype, and, you know, all the fireworks and fanfare behind, you know, all their DEI stuff, that, or little or a lot of their DEI stuff. You know, they kind of believe the hype, and they think, oh my God, this is going to be the place. This is going to be the place for me. Their culture is great. They care about people and things of that nature. But once they get on the inside, it's like almost like a hollow balloon, right? It's all this hot air, right? Or actually, and let me just top that off, is that they get in there because, let's say they are a person, you know, they're a BIPOC candidate, and now they have the job. Then all of a sudden, DEI becomes their responsibility. Right. It becomes their responsibility. And just like in you know, the days at that company with the 3 letters, it was somehow my responsibility, but that was because I was actually passionate about it, but not making a red cent from it. Right. So they'll hire this BIPOC talent, they'll bring them in, maybe they have a job, you know, account manager, whatever the case may be, but, oh, you're BIPOC, so yeah, let's have you kind of start doing the DEI stuff too, but they're not paying them a red cent. Right.
Okay.
That's exploitation. When we put it in brass tacks, that's straight up exploitation, right? Just hire someone to actually do that job. So I would say it's definitely believing the hype, not asking the right questions, not doing your research, not making sure that the answers from everything, from all the questions that you asked, match up with all the research that you did. Those are the major mistakes that I think some talent faces. And then when they get to a place, they're like, maybe after 3 months, 6 months in, they're already looking for a brand new job. They're already looking for a brand new job. And see, the problem where the agencies make a mistake is that if someone is already looking for a brand new job after 3 to 6 months, you actually are losing.
Oh,
You're actually
oh,
losing.
oh,
You're actually losing because then you have to spend more money to find someone. So if I mean, I could talk, I don't want to get into finances here, and I know we're totally out of time, but actually, like financially, they're playing a stupid game. So I always say never go to Vegas with advertising people. Because they always seem to place their bets on like one number and one color instead of like kind of diversifying it, and like maybe you have black 13 and red 2 and black 4, then at least you have some chance of actually winning in a big way, right?
okay.
So
So
I'll just leave it as
I love the way that this one mistake actually uncovered a series of other pieces. And the one mistake is stop buying the bullshit, right?
yeah
And do your research. I call it sniff testing. If you
yeah
smell something that doesn't smell so good, it's probably not so good.
it's probably
And
bullshit.
right. So do your research and also really, really drill down on the data, the facts, not the talk, the facts, and understand, that of course it may not happen overnight, but don't go into it with an expectation that you are going to have to carry this boulder yourself, right? Make that very clear. And if you are finding yourself in a position of being overly responsible, then what do you do? You got to speak up. I
Yeah.
mean, you got to call them out and,
Yep.
be careful, be careful,
Yep.
be careful out there. Be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that, we tell our fellows all the time, you have to show up, but you also have to show out, right? You have to leave a memorable impression every time. You have to show up and you have to show out every single time, and use that time wisely, right? Because you have to believe that there is going to be pushback, even from your leaders of color. There's going to be pushback, right? Because your leaders of color and even non-leaders of color, they have to look at the grand picture. So you have to make sure that the benefits are triple about over what you are actually thinking of, right? It's very important to have your act together and basically be ready for whatever type of pushback you may be getting, and say, look, there's nothing like this going on anywhere, in whether it's our network or in the industry, right? That's how you really sell this change and make sure that the change is not only impactful, but it's also something that's going to, as I said earlier, is something that's going to hopefully outlive us. And that's the path that I'm on. That's the path that 100 Rows of Concrete are on. And that's the path that we're just going to stay on until, the wheels fall off, basically.
I want everyone to hear that last point that you just said. Please say it one more time, because I literally had the chills when you shared that with me right before the show. Say it one more time, please.
About the wheels falling off.
No, about outliving us.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Has this problem been around for 6 decades? But our goal is to make sure that it doesn't outlive us. I mean, but unfortunately, it has outlived some people already, right? But our purpose is to make sure that it doesn't outlive us, and that our future, so like my kids, your kids, whoever's kids, grandkids, neighbors' kids, or whatever, they just have it a little bit easier to get into this business, and they can actually have C-suite positions and not be considered an anomaly. Because I get so pissed off when I hear, oh, well, this is our first Black CEO, or this is our first Latinx CCO. Like, I want those first to be over with, and just another CCO, another CEO, and also for them to have the opportunity to maybe not be forced to do what some of us entrepreneurs do. Is the only way we see the C-suite is if we create our own companies.
Oh, right.
Right. Because and very short story, but 90% of BIPOC people will never see the C-suite. 90%. In their lifetime, they will not see the C-suite unless they create their own company. Those numbers totally suck. So we need to figure out ways to change that. We need to support our organizations that are working with diverse professionals, whether it's of color, women, whatever type of backgrounds. We need to support those organizations. There's far too many for me to shout out, but we need to also show them love too and invest in them as well. Because let me tell you something, the agencies can't do it on their own. And I'm going to say that right now. The agencies can't do it on their own. They need to start looking outside of their little body of water and really start looking at bigger bodies of water, people that are actually on the ground, running really fast with a baton and making that change. Like, yeah, have your people on the inside, but you need people on the outside that some of your candidates will talk to and tell these nightmare stories to before they'll ever tell you, because they're afraid they don't want to be blackballed or anything like that.
Right, right. So the risk is high and the consequences are real, and it must be done. I mean, not just for us today, of course, but for all those that are coming and growing. So thank you. Thank you, Keni Thacker. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing out. And we are about out. And I am so unbelievably appreciative of all the work that you're doing. Of course, here in every and any way to collaborate and support and be a part of any effort to make these changes stick and stick for good.
Yeah, so, tattoo solutions. We need tattoo
solutions. I love that.
Tattoo solutions.
Tattoo solutions.
Tattoo. There it is. One of my tattoos. Tattoo solutions. Right. No more band-aids. No more band-aids.
No band-aids. Done with that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out a little bit longer. It was worth it for sure. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Hang around for a second, Keni.
Okay.